The lights in the room were soft but clear, shining down on a long table made of smooth, dark metal. Around it sat beings from across the stars, some tall and thin with glowing eyes, others short and round with voices like thunder. They had come together to talk about something important: what to do with the humans. Most of the humans at the table were speaking. They wore uniforms or suits and took turns talking, explaining, asking questions. They wanted to show that humanity could be trusted, that they were ready to sit at the big table of spacefaring races. But one human did not speak at all. His name was Captain Daniel Harper. He sat quietly, hands folded, watching everything. His face was calm, almost relaxed, but his eyes never stopped moving. He looked at every alien, every screen, every guard standing by the door. He didn't nod when others nodded. He didn't smile when someone made a joke. He just watched. Across the table, an alien named Vector, a tall being with skin like stone and voice like wind through caves, noticed Harper's silence. Most of the meeting had passed and Harper had yet to say a word. Vector leaned forward slightly and asked, "Human representative, do you have nothing to say?" Everyone turned to look at Harper. Some of the other humans seemed surprised. Lena Cruz, his assistant, glanced at him but said nothing. Harper gave a small smile, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes. He looked at Vector and then slowly around the room. "I'm listening," he finally said. That was all. Vector blinked once, slowly, then sat back. Another alien, a small floating being wrapped in cloth-like wings, whispered something to its neighbor. The meeting went on, but now there was a shift. Some of the aliens kept glancing at Harper. Even the ones who had been confident before now seemed unsure. They had seen humans act many ways: loud, proud, sometimes reckless, but not like this. Not silent. Not calculating. What they didn't know was that Harper had already heard everything he needed to hear. He knew the rules they wanted to set, the limits they wanted to place on human ships and colonies. And he was already thinking about how to break them, without saying a word. Because the truth was, when humans stayed quiet, it usually meant one thing: they were getting ready. While the meeting continued, some of the aliens couldn't stop thinking about Harper's silence. It was not like other humans they had met before. Most humans talked a lot, laughed loud, and acted fast, but this one just sat still, watching like he already knew what would happen next. Vector whispered to his aide, asking about Harper. The aide tapped on a small screen built into his arm and read from a file. Daniel Harper, human male. Served in Earth Defense Fleet. Led several covert missions, last known assignment classified. Vector frowned. Why is he here and not speaking? The aide didn't answer. Meanwhile, others at the table began to recall stories they had heard, stories that made them uneasy. One alien remembered how a human colony on a faraway world had beaten back an invasion without any help. They used old mining machines and broken ships to make traps. The invaders thought they were weak, but the humans let them walk right into their own destruction. Another alien thought of how human engineers had taken apart a piece of alien tech in just days, tech that had taken their own scientists years to build. The humans didn't ask for help. They just looked at it, figured it out, and then made something better. And there was the time a small team of human spies had stopped a war by pretending to be diplomats. They got inside a secret meeting and turned enemies into allies, all while smiling and shaking hands. These were not stories of a weak species. These were stories of something else, something dangerous when left alone too long. Back in the room, Harper still said nothing. He leaned back slightly, eyes calm, but his mind was moving fast. Lena Cruz sat beside him, her fingers resting lightly on her lap. She wasn't nervous. She had seen this before. She remembered the last mission, when Harper had stayed silent, for 3 whole days. The team thought he had given up. But then on the 4th day, he gave orders, and those orders changed everything. Now as the aliens talked and argued, they started to feel it again. That strange feeling you get when you realize you might have made a mistake. They had invited humans to the table thinking they were learning the rules. But maybe The humans were just learning how to break them, and the quietest one among them was the one who knew how to do it best. The meeting kept going, but the mood had changed. What had started as a routine diplomatic session was now something else. The alien still spoke, still tried to push their points, but they watched Harper more than they watched each other. He still said nothing. His silence had become a weight in the room. One of the alien envoys, a tall being named Threx from the Corin Alliance, stood up and pointed at the screen floating above the table. It showed maps of human space marked with limits the aliens wanted to impose. "These are fair terms," Threx said, his voice deep and sharp. "Humans must agree to stay within these zones. No ships beyond them without permission." Several human diplomats nodded quickly. One of them, a man named Richard Cole, began talking about how humanity valued peace and cooperation. Harper didn't nod. He didn't even look at the screen. Lena Cruz, his assistant, sat beside him, calm and quiet. Her fingers moved slightly on her lap, tapping against her leg in a slow rhythm. If anyone had been paying attention, they might have noticed she was sending a message, small, hidden, encoded inside the diplomatic reports that were already approved by alien security. No one noticed. Outside the room, in the vast halls of the alien megaship, small devices hidden in earlier shipments began to wake up. They weren't weapons. Not yet. They were just listening, waiting for the right signal. Back at the table, another alien envoy, a small floating being wrapped in soft light, looked at Harper with curiosity. "Human representative," it said, its voice like wind through trees. "Do you agree with these terms?" Cole turned to Harper, expecting him to speak now. So did the others. But Harper only smiled again. The same smile, the one that didn't reach his eyes. He leaned back, still, relaxed, still watching. "I'm still listening," he said. Some of the aliens exchanged glances. This wasn't how meetings like this usually went. Humans were supposed to argue, to beg, to make deals. Not sit and wait like this, not act like they already knew something no one else did. Threx frowned. "You do not speak much, Captain Harper." Harper finally looked directly at him. "That's because I don't need to," he said. And then for the first time he stood up, not to leave, not to speak, just to walk. Slowly he began moving around the table. The aliens watched him closely. None of them liked what it meant. Something was happening, and Harper was already several steps ahead. As Harper walked slowly around the table, the aliens watched him like he was a storm about to break. His steps were calm, steady, like he had done this before. Lena Cruz stayed seated, her hand still resting on her lap, but her eyes followed him closely. Harper reached out slightly and brushed his fingers along the edge of the table. It looked like a simple gesture, almost bored. But hidden inside his ring was a small scanner. It took readings of the materials, the energy flow, even the weak spots in the structure. He didn't need to ask for a tour. He was getting one anyway. Vector, the tall alien with stone-like skin, stood up suddenly. "You are not authorized to move freely," he said, voice deep and firm. Harper stopped walking and turned to face him. "I'm not doing anything," he said. "Just looking." "Then sit down and look from there," another envoy snapped. Harper gave that same quiet smile again. Then, without arguing, he sat back in his chair, but his eyes kept moving, watching, waiting. Outside the room, deep inside the walls of the megaship, small machines hidden in supply crates began to shift. They moved slowly through maintenance tunnels, guided by silent commands sent from Lena's device. They weren't loud. They didn't draw attention. They just started placing themselves in key spots. Back at the table, Threx, the Corin envoy, leaned forward. "You have said nothing," he said. "You walk around instead of speaking. You watch instead of agreeing. Why?" Harper looked at him for a long moment. Then he spoke, low and clear. "Because silence tells you more than words do." Some of the aliens frowned. Others looked uneasy. They had seen humans talk too much, laugh too loud, act before thinking. But this was different. Lena shifted slightly in her seat. She tapped once on her wrist, sending the final message. And somewhere inside the megaship, something clicked into place. The lights flickered for just a second. No one noticed, except Harper. He closed his eyes briefly, as if thinking. Then he opened them again. "You asked why I am silent," he said, looking around the room. "Now you'll see what silence means." Vector narrowed his glowing eyes. "What did you do?" he asked. Harper didn't answer right away. He simply leaned back, folded his hands again, and waited. Because now, the silence wasn't just listening. It was working. And soon, the whole ship would feel it. The megaship shuddered. Not much, just a small tremor like a deep breath taken too fast. Most of the aliens didn't notice. But Harper did. His fingers tightened slightly on the table, just enough to show he felt it. Lena Cruz noticed too. She gave the smallest nod, almost invisible. Something had begun. Vector looked up sharply. "What was that?" A Corin technician tapped quickly on a wrist device. "Unknown. Minor system fluctuation." But Harper smiled again. The same quiet smile. "You asked what silence means," he said. "Now you'll find out." He leaned back in his chair as if nothing else mattered. Lena stayed still, hands folded. She had done her part. Now it was up to the machines. Deep inside the walls of the ship, the small hidden devices had started their work. They were not weapons, not yet. They were keys. They unlocked old systems, turned off alarms, and rewrote access codes, all without making a sound. They had been hiding for months, waiting for this moment. Back at the table, Threx stood up, his voice sharp. "What have you done?" Harper looked at him calmly. "We've been listening," he said. "For a long time. We didn't come here to argue. We came here to remind you who you're dealing with." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small screen. He placed it on the table and tapped it once. A map appeared. It showed the entire megaship, glowing lines of power and movement. And then, one by one, lights began to blink red. Alarms shut down. Security doors locked. Comms channels scrambled. The room fell silent. Vector's eyes glowed brighter. "You've hacked our systems." "No," Harper said. "We just turned them back on." He explained how human tech had been hiding inside diplomatic gifts, translation software, and even simple tools used during early visits. The aliens had scanned everything, sure they had found all threats, but they missed what they didn't understand. Humans didn't always fight with guns or ships. Sometimes they fought with patience, with silence. Outside, in the halls of the ship, drones that had been hidden in supply crates began to move. They floated silently through corridors, disabling key systems, not to destroy, just to remind. Remind the galaxy that when humans stay quiet, it doesn't mean they are weak, it means they are ready. Threx took a step back. "This is an act of war." Harper finally stood up. His voice was calm, but firm. "No," he said. "This is an act of memory." He looked around the room. "You forgot what we can do. And now you remember." The room was quiet now, but not the same kind of quiet as before. This silence was heavier, full of shock, full of fear. Vector stood frozen, his glowing eyes scanning the screen Harper had left on the table. The map of the megaship still pulsed with red lights, systems going offline, doors locking, comms failing. It wasn't a full attack. It was something worse, a message. The humans had control. Not all of it, just enough to remind the aliens who they were dealing with. Threx turned to Harper, voice low and angry. "You've broken every rule of this meeting." Harper didn't look worried. He looked tired, like he had done this too many times before. "Rules?" he said. "You made rules so you could feel safe, so you could pretend we were just another species you could manage." He looked around the room, but deep down you knew better. Some of the aliens shifted in their seats. Others stared at the floor. They had felt it from the start, the wrongness of Harper's silence, the way he watched, the way he waited. Now they understood why. Lena Cruz stood up beside him. She tapped, her wrist once sending one last signal. Across the ship, small drones finished their work. They powered down, hiding again inside walls and panels. Not gone. Just waiting for the next time, Harper walked slowly toward the exit. Lena followed. No one tried to stop them. Vector finally spoke, his voice tight. "You're making a mistake." Harper paused at the door. "No," he said. "You did?" Then he walked out. The moment the door closed behind them, the room filled with voices. Some shouted orders, others argued. Some just sat quietly, stunned. On the table, the screen blinked one last time. Then it changed. Instead of the ship's systems, it now showed something else. Videos, files, records, proof of human victories hidden in the shadows, of tech built in secret, of deals made behind closed doors, of ships that had vanished, only to reappear where they weren't expected. This wasn't a war. It was a warning. And it was loud. Outside, in the halls of the megaship, Harper and Lena walked calmly. Guards passed them, running the other way, too confused to question them. No alarm sounded. No weapons were raised, because the humans hadn't attacked. They had only reminded everyone what silence really meant, and sometimes that was louder than any war cry. As they stepped into the shuttle bay, Lena looked at Harper. "Do you think they'll forget again?" she asked. He smiled slightly. "Maybe," he said. "But when they do, we'll remind them." Again. Weeks passed, and the megaship never spoke of what happened. But the silence that followed was louder than any announcement. The Galactic Accord changed its stance without saying why. New rules were made. Rules that gave humans more freedom, more access, more trust. No one said it out loud, but they all knew why. Because of one man who didn't speak. Because of one woman who watched and waited. Because of a species that had learned the power of silence. On Earth, news of the event spread slowly, not through official reports but through whispers in bars, quiet nods in labs, and knowing smiles in military halls. People didn't cheer or throw parades. They just looked at each other and said things like, "Yeah, that sounds like us. Should have known better." Never bring a talker to a silence fight. In orbit above Earth, Captain Daniel Harper sat in the quiet corner of a space station, drinking coffee from an old metal cup. Lena Cruz sat across from him, flipping through data on a small screen. "They're still watching us," she said. Harper nodded, looking out the window at the stars. "Good," he said. "Let them." He took a slow sip of coffee, savoring the taste. Outside, human ships moved through space like ghosts, fast, quiet, and always ready. Down below, on Earth, children played in the sun. Scientists worked late into the night. Engineers built machines no one else could understand. And in hidden corners of space, human scouts kept moving forward farther than anyone expected. Because that's what humans did. They didn't wait for permission. They didn't need approval. They listened. They learned. And when the time came, they acted. Sometimes with weapons, sometimes with words, but sometimes just with silence. Vector and the others would remember this day. Maybe not the exact words, maybe not every move, but they would remember the feeling. The cold, quiet fear of realizing you had underestimated something you thought you understood. And deep down, they knew. This wasn't the end. It was just the pause before the next step. As Harper stood up, finishing his coffee, he looked at Lena and smiled. "Come on," he said. "We've got work to do." And with that, he walked away. Not with a shout, not with a threat, but with the quiet confidence of a species that had finally found its place among the stars and proved it belonged there.